trade is not the most exciting thing that members get elected to Congress to deal with. And when you walk up and down the street, they won't be asking, are you supporting trade for Africa, or Europe, or the Pacific? They want to know, when am I going to get a job? Trade is a funny thing. Anyone who loses a job because they're too old, they haven't kept up, the technology has moved ahead of them, and they always say, I lost it not because of my firm, but, you know, trade, those Chinese, that's how they lost the job. Anyone who gets a job is because they were bright, they were smart, and had nothing to do at all with our trade policy. So, you can't go to the district unless your district is dependent on exports. So that if you're in Detroit and you said you broke down the barrier in Japan, hey, you're okay because of the number of jobs that are connected where people know they gotta sell those cars outside of Detroit. So that no matter what American firm you're doing business with in any country, no matter where you're buying anything, you let them know that they stand to lose a lot of money and a lot of jobs and a lot of prestige if they don't act like this is their last chance to be successful. I would be the last one to say that color influences anybody's mind as to whether or not they support the President of the United States. But the difference in this country looking at Europe and Israel and looking at Africa is clouded by our history. And we haven't broken out of that completely, especially when you laugh when they say Africa is not a country. You have no idea how serious that statement is. It's a painful statement. And it's due to lack of history and a resistance in trying to understand how Africa economically is where she is today. And so what I'm trying to say, and maybe Scott can help out, we have to talk about a crusade and not a campaign. We can't talk about how Africa fits into the international trade policy of the United States. We have to talk about the possibility of a failure driving American prestige further into a climate that makes us look like an imperialistic country that deals more with bombs than diplomats. And we have to make certain that everybody that has any compassion and understanding of the progress that America is going to be making means that we can't allow our failure to respond to African needs to hold us back from becoming that symbol all over the world of doing the right thing and helping ourselves by helping other people. I think this takes a world-class campaign, Scott. And this goes far beyond speeding up AGOA. Because what the ambassador did not say is that TPP is no way as near as popular as AGOA. And is so much bigger that AGOA is this much compared to the importance of TPP. And among the Democrats, and even the Congressional Black Caucus, the support for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's not on the radar screen, except the opposition to it from people who oppose any trade agreement for other reasons. Which means that if you put AGOA, we're giving the president authority to negotiate other treaties, or if you say that you're not going to deal with AGOA until we get the votes for the trade, we got a major problem. And how the heck do you explain it? I don't know. You can't just write it off as American politics. And you don't need any reasons why it should be done. And the only reason apologies I interrupted because, I mean, this is a spectacular example of how a dream can become a reality, and there's no limit to how far it can go, because the progress being made in Africa is exciting, but where it's starting from is not, which means the potential is unbelievable. But I don't really think that, I would hate to leave here thinking that you went back to tell the African, everyone's for it. Everyone's for it. But if you take that energy and excitement and attach it to something that everyone is not for, that's a heavy political burden to pick up. But if we make it clear when we talk with people that we know that you know that AGOA is different, and we have to be prepared to look at someone in the eyes and say, this is not a simple another trade issue. This is the heart of our country and the direction in which we want to go. And as they said in the civil rights movement, which side are you on? And don't complicate it about talking about the Pacific and Europe and other issues which are legitimate, but it has nothing at all to do with why all of you came here at 8 o'clock in the morning. It has nothing to do with listening to a problem that a handful of people have about another issue that comes under the blanket of trade. I really think, I'm 85, and I think very carefully how I'm going to get my way into heaven, and where the holy cities are. I'm so far ahead of the curve. I really don't want to make any mistakes. And it would seem to me that no priest, no minister, no rabbi, no person of God that talks about multiplying bread and fish and all that other stuff cannot come up with an idea that this is a time for us to do a hell of a lot of multiplying and get some points for doing it spiritual and morally, and take it out of the category that here we go with another trade bill. And so I hope there's a way that we can make this a passionate issue of America, because we'll never, never, never be able to explain to the developing countries about a problem that we have in this great country, that someone can just throw some sand into the engine and it stops. So I hope the blizzard never comes, but time is running out, and there's no limit to the things you may have to do that lobbyists have no idea about how to get over a basic problem that we have in this country that started 400 years ago.
Congressman, thank you very much. I think you've just demonstrated once again why we look to you and how much your leadership means and how much it has meant from day one, back in 1994 or 95, when you had this idea that we should be doing something different with Africa, and it should no longer just be aid, but it should be partnership. And we thank you for that. We thank you for the message that we need to shift gears from advocacy to crusade. And I think this is a passionate issue, certainly for everybody in this room. The challenge to us is to take it out. And let me just open it up now so we can get people to amplify and share their thoughts. And again, just thank you for your investment in us, in Africa, and what you do every day. It means a great deal. Thank you. Yes. Walker, would you please?
Can I stay?
There are microphones right here on both sides. Please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
My name is Walker Williams. I'm president of Leadership Africa USA. Before I make a few comments, I want to thank Ambassador Bass. I want to thank Congressman Rangel for putting us on the right plane. I want to thank the panel, and I want to thank all of you for being here. I hope that when you arrived this morning, you were able to get a publication that we had put out. We don't know if we had enough copies, but we put this out to define the issues and the opportunities that are being debated that in the AGOA debate that's now going on in the Hill. And we had gotten those to the African Union trade ministers last week, and we are hoping to use this as the basis for further conversations. But I want to take a page from what Congressman Rangel has said, and some of us, a small group of us, have been meeting, and almost like we had heard his message, have been talking about putting together what we are referring to as a call to action to reauthorize AGOA. And we're Leadership Africa, working with our partners, is going to be putting up a website this Friday, and each of the organizations who are going to be part of that will in fact send to their own list of supporters, and those supporters will send to other supporters, and we will put messages up on the website. But I want to talk about just a few of the people who have already, that organizing committee. So the committee that we have been talking to includes the Constituency for Africa. It includes the Foundation for Democracy in Africa. It includes New Markets Lab, the Africa Society, Chevron, the U.S. Chamber, the U.S. Angola Chamber of Commerce, and Whitney has agreed to also be a part of that. So we're going to expand it. It is an open, it's a big tent. It's not something we want to make this the crusade that Congressman Rangel mentioned. So with that, I'll say thank you.
Walker, thank you for that call to action. So if folks in this room and outside of this room want to get involved, can we go to that website and sign up? How does it work?
On Friday?
On Friday.
I've got so it'll be up on Friday. And what I'm going to suggest is that our partners will be sending out an email to their list to drive them to the website.
Okay.
And we will and the website will be interactive, and it'll be very effective, and we can record a lot of data, drill down with a lot of metrics about who's supporting it, and we can look at that, and we can use that.
They can sign up.
And of course, sign up.
And what's the URL? What's the website address?
We'll send it out.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Stay
Right?
tuned.
Okay, thank you. Let me go over here. Sherry.
Okay, great. Hello, and I do want to thank Congressman Rangel, Congresswoman Bass, and all the panelists for a great presentation, and clearly as well to our trade representative, Ambassador Froman. I lead the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, and our focus really is looking at AGOA as a tool for development. And I want to point out that Rahama Wright, in the work that she's been doing with women in the Shea activity, is really a perfect example of how AGOA has both the potential for broad economic benefits and their economic benefits that can be broadly distributed. And so that when we think about AGOA, my answer and my call is for us to think about AGOA in terms of its development impact. That if we want to end poverty in Africa, trade is instrumental. That trade doesn't just benefit the factory workers and those that are involved in the oil sector and other areas, but it has the potential to reach deep into the economy, to reach smallholders, artisans, and those that are really at the grassroots. So when we think about, even on the Hill, the different constituencies, we want to encourage in reaching out to those constituencies that are concerned with poverty alleviation, because trade is a route to alleviating poverty. In terms of the big issue of how do we get this through and approved, I can't help but wonder, isn't there some capacity to carve out AGOA from the other trade agenda? If there is such broad support across the different, both houses, well, the House and the Senate and the Republicans and the Democrats, can't we come together and call for it to be carved out and approved as an act unto itself? So any comments or reactions you have, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. I just want to point out that the African Development Foundation is a U.S. agency that punches far above its budget.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thank
does
you,
a really
greatly
good job
appreciate
at it. But Chair, I think that is the point. I think that is the point that Congressman Rangel is making. We have to move AGOA on its own.
Right.
It's different from the other trade legislation. This is economic development. This is about partnership. This is about upliftment. And that's different. So I think that's the direction that
Great.
we're going to move.
Thank you.
Let me go over here.
Good morning. I want to say, first and foremost, I think Congresswoman Bass, you and your staff are beyond remarkable. You are champions for the whole entire continent of Africa. So thank you and greetings.
Just introduce yourself.
My name is T. Thompson of the African Trade Business Center. So greetings to all of the ambassadors in my broken French, sous excellences. In understanding that the crusade of AGOA's primary purpose is to increase trade and enhance the development of eligible countries through preferential access to the U.S. market, my question is there any advocacy for long-term reauthorization terms, so not just 10 years, not just 20 years, so that it can be very impactful to the women or to the communities that are having great economic development. So where is the advocacy? I'm so glad that the different ambassadors are here and that I can pose this question because I believe wholeheartedly that it needs to be longer, so much longer. So would someone kindly respond to that?
Sure. Let me just ask the panel. We have three sort of questions here. The first is a call to action, which I think is clear and compelling. We've just heard, what about the long-term nature, how long? And then also Sherry's point about, can we really separate out AGOA from the trade legislation? Let's just talk about the length of the AGOA renewal. I'd like to hear some different perspectives on that, starting with the ambassador.
Thank you very much. As it is, we are having problems recommending minimum of 10 to 15 years. So I don't know about even longer than that. Permanent. So the responses that we have received when discussing this, one of them was that, the legislation is meant to start Africa off, and not to be permanent. And that it may not help to depend on AGOA indefinitely. So we have to do something to make sure that we are weaned, so to say, so that we are on our own. So as far as we are concerned, for now, we think that about 15 years would do. By that time, we should be okay.
Scott, what about American business? And
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you're dealing with a multitude of industries, right? The chamber represents some 3 million interests. So you've got folks in the textile industry that would love to see, and I don't mean to speak for them, but a permanent reauthorization of AGOA that goes on in forever. And then you have other folks that are dealing with some very dynamic challenges in individual markets around the continent. And AGOA does provide us that opportunity to have consideration and debate amongst the bilateral relationships. So it's a bit of a split, I'll be honest with you, in the thinking. 10 years, and I think generally sounds like an appropriate timetable with some modifications into how it's delivered. How do you get more private sector input into the consultation process that around the AGOA eligibility? So every year there's an AGOA eligibility process. The private sector should be brought into that so we can discuss where are countries, where are we really facing problems? It shouldn't be you have a coup and you're out. If you don't have a coup, you're in. It should be a much more diverse conversation around the AGOA process, which I think if you could get to some of those mechanics of it all, you could look at a longer term reauthorization that affords us the opportunity for engagement on bilateral issues, if that's where it gets down to, or regional. I think everyone agrees that Mr. Froman stated that we would love to see regional bilateral investment treaties, but we also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there are many countries that quite frankly can't compete with the South Africas and the Nigerias and the Kenyas, and they're going to need that AGOA support for more than 10 years. So we've got to figure out a mix between the two, and I don't know the answer, quite frankly, right now, but I know we've had long discussions with Congresswoman Bass, Senator, Ambassador Bass's office, depending on which role you're taking on today, and others. We, with Chamber, came up with a number of diverse businesses last year to the House and the Senate, and as well as met with USTR to have that discussion of what next. And I think that's really what it comes down to is we all agree AGOA is a passionate cause. We all have to get behind it. It is something that we cannot just, look beyond and say, well, I'm glad we did it, now what's next? We have to commit to its reauthorization, but we also have to commit to what is next. And I think that's part of that conversation that we need to grow into.
Right, thanks. And Rahama, you're right there at the coalface, using AGOA on a daily basis. What are your thoughts on about the length of its reauthorization?
I think I agree with the ambassador in terms of looking at it from a perspective of extending it for 15 years. I do think there needs to be flexibility because there are lessons that we're learning in terms of, AGOA and what it's been able to do. I think that, over the next 15 years, we really need to look at how to reduce most of the imports coming in, reduce it from being oil, but increase the amount that are non-oil, because in the sector that I work in, the majority of the people are in the agriculture sector. And so for me, it's really looking at how can we improve it so the impact is, there's more diversity and impact. And I think that it's to extend it for 15 years and then throughout the course of 15 years, really monitoring and seeing how in terms of strengthening it so that there's more capacity building, there's more training, there's more emphasis on women, there's more emphasis on young entrepreneurs, and seeing over the next 15 years how it's improving so that it doesn't become, like the ambassador says, a dependency.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I would just add, I think AGOA was never meant to be permanent. I think everyone agrees with that. As Ambassador Froman said, you've got the European Union developing economic partnership agreements, free trade agreements that put American companies at a disadvantage. But AGOA still needs more time to grow and for more people to benefit. And I think that's the challenge here, is figuring out what that road forward is all about. But we know that it starts with the reauthorization of AGOA by when? End of February?
Middle of February?
Please, over here.
Thank you so much. I'm Elise Young with Women Thrive Worldwide. I just want to thank the co-sponsors and all the supporters of the event. And I really appreciated Ms. Wright's great example of needing a holistic value chain approach for women producers in the north of Ghana to equally benefit from AGOA. And my question is, although we have great examples of the way that women have been engaged, we haven't yet fully, equally engaged women across the continent in AGOA. And in this next step of reauthorization, how do we do that? How do we prioritize women's economic empowerment through trade capacity building, through gender policies, so that we really fully unleash that power that's going to benefit economic growth, poverty alleviation, businesses, and the countries as a whole? Thanks.
Great, thanks. Ambassador Girma.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank Congressman Bass for the excellent work that I've been doing, and Congressman Rangel for I met him in 2000 when I was here with a group of the African ministers. By that time, when we came to the office to thank him for the job he has done, and he has been continuing to support us. I would like to thank him for that too. All what has been said this morning gives sense for all the speakers, but on 2 points. Yesterday, I was in the hearing that has been organized by the Committee of Finance. I was also part of the meeting of the ministers who have gone around and tried to echo what we have been thinking. To be very frank, in yesterday's hearing, particularly in the morning session, I realized that the issue we are working on has not been made up so far. It has just given me the lesson that we have to work hard.
Wait, can people in the back hear Ambassador? I think this is very important. Ambassador, can you go to the microphone, because I want to make sure everyone hears you.
So I was just speaking on what I have seen yesterday. In the morning session in the Committee of Finance, I have attended with some of my colleagues, the ambassadors. And I was expecting actually many of the senators, at least in the Q&A session, to raise about AGOA on when this reauthorization is going to be done and on what it's going to look like. To my surprise, no one senator from the committee members raised this issue. I'm not going to blame them. Maybe they have not given it the thought we are giving it. So it just gave me the message that there is a lot we have to do to be able to bring this subject to their attention. If things continue this way, the renewal we are talking about today, which is already delayed, would further be delayed for sure. That's the message I got yesterday. And last week when we were to the Ways and Means Committee, thanks to Congressman Rangel, he came in and he tried to explain on how this reauthorization of AGOA has to be dissociated from the local politics of the United States, which is a very good thing, and we have to push along this line and with the tone that we have been hearing today. This is on reauthorization of AGOA. So when we talk about reauthorization, we are talking about something that has already been delayed, and delayed beyond, for some countries, it can be repaired. If we take the case of Lesotho, Lesotho is a country in where 1 out of 45 persons are employed in AGOA-related businesses. So if AGOA is delayed and this workforce is going to be dispersed, you can see the dangers that's related with this. And the more it's delayed, the more this risk is going to be coming up. This is on the reauthorization. On the future of AGOA, when we requested for 15 years of reauthorization, we were not of the thinking that it would live forever. But in 15 years from today, many of the African countries may be closer to the lower middle-income country. In 15 years from today. By that time, if someone comes up with a different type of arrangement, then it gives sense. But today, if someone is going to talk to us before any reauthorization is done about what the future of AGOA would be, in my own sense, it doesn't give sense. Let's do the reauthorization, and reauthorization enough so that it gives us time to think for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Good morning. My name is Tabab Wasafa. I represent the new, growing, energetic, vibrant U.S. African diaspora business community. First, before I make my comment, I'd like to give a deep appreciated gratitude to Congresswoman Karen Bass, Congressman Rangel, for doing what you're doing to put that Africa banner high and center. It means a lot to us. It's our lifeline. I am a founder of a small business with a big vision called Blessed Coffee, like my sister Ham. I'm glad to see you there. We're represented. My small business aspires to work with 300,000 small coffee farmers in the coffee growing regions of Ethiopia, representing 1.5 million people. I'm opening a business in partnership with them to have a bottom-up value chain that connects the farmers directly with the market by extending an investment opportunity to them. The 300,000 small coffee farmers are ready to invest $10 in the coming 3 years to support. That is $3 million. That will create jobs on this side. I am conceived because of AGOA. I am here today because of AGOA. and taking the opportunity that I am extended to me as an African American, as an Ethiopian new immigrant, to matter on both sides, to create wealth, make an impact. So AGOA is a lifeline. Not only that, the little company that I've established in the last 3 years have earned Champion of Change Award from the White House. Many African diaspora businesses are ready to emulate it. And we've created an organization called U.S. African Diaspora Business Council, and we're going to duplicate my little business model in the coming 20, 30 years with 34 more businesses. Now, we're talking about a lifeline. You cut AGOA, you cut my dream. You cut AGOA, you stop AGOA, you stop this dream that is coming alive. For the very first time, the sons and daughters of Africa are taking the challenge and seizing the opportunity to make a difference. This is a matter of life and death for our humanity. So I'm only trying to make a passionate plea, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure the powers listen to our aspiration. And last, I will say, in the future of U.S.-Africa trade relations, at the U.S. Africa Diaspora Business Council in the opening ceremony, I said something. If the world needs hope, the two identities that are coined together that bring a lot of promise is the word Africa and America. Africa is rich in human resources. Africa is rich in natural resources. Africa is ancient. Africa is magic. Africa is rising. And America, as we know, is vibrant. So the best of the two calibrated is a hope for humanity. So AGOA is at the very center of that. So thank you very much.
This is great. Take one more, then we'll hear some more comments. Yes.
Thank you, sir. My name is Brian Dabbs. I'm a reporter with International Trade Today. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming to speak with us. If you don't mind, if I could direct this question to you and also Mr. Eisner. So there's a lot of discussion about potential changes to the AGOA program as part of this renewal iteration, although there hasn't, from what I've gathered, been a lot of concrete proposals floated and circulated on the Hill, at least not in the sense that they're gaining a ton of momentum. So my question just is, do you expect duty reductions, or customs trade facilitation initiatives as part of this iteration? And if not, can you comment kind of on what you expect to be the most likely candidates for changes?
Great. Let me, if I may, we've got a couple questions here, so let me just work backwards. And Rahama, ask you to address the first question about how do we prioritize women in economic development in AGOA. There are programs like AWIP, which is a key part of AGOA. Is that relevant to you? Is that enough? Do we need to do more?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question, and it's something that I've been working on and working towards for the last few years. And if we look at Sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of Sub-Saharan Africans live in areas where agriculture is the majority of job creation. And the majority of those people doing the agriculture are women. So right away, if we're looking at AGOA and we're saying we want to impact the lives of more women, we have to look at some of the restrictions on agricultural imports, like restrictions around dairy, peanuts, sugar, and cotton. And so that's one thing that I think we need to look at if we want to say that this trade policy can help impact the lives of women. Additionally, I think the investments in capacity building is really important. It's not necessarily that people don't want to do something. It's a question of know-how, how to do it. How do I create a high-quality shea product? How can I make my packaging be improved? How can I connect to a buyer? All of those things are concepts and skills and tools that women need training in. And I think the AWEP program, as you were mentioning, is one way to get them access to that capacity building. So honestly, I believe it's looking at agriculture as one way of enlarging the impact on women, and it's also looking at capacity building and training.
Great, thank you. And Scott, we heard from the diaspora. We've heard the question about trade facilitation. Can you comment to either one of those?
Yeah, I just want to touch real quickly on the women's issue. And I think the great thing about AGOA is it's an open slate. It's not directing one towards the other. And I think I'd call on the ambassadors and the leadership of the African governments to say, what is our priority in AGOA? We have seen a marked increase in countries who have an AGOA action plan be able to utilize AGOA in a much more effective way. And I think that should be one of the requirements as we move forward, is a question about what do you do about AGOA, is require all of the beneficiaries of AGOA to come up with an action plan that they can then sit down with their constituencies, whether they're women, agriculture, so they can explain to them, here's how we as a government have bought into the idea that AGOA in the U.S. market is important to us, and here is our plan about how we're going to invest in our people. It shouldn't always be or have to be a U.S. pulling. It should also be a large push from the African governments to say, here's our priorities as well when it comes to AGOA. We want to have 100% peanut exports, and it's not in it, so I, as a president, I'm going to fly to Georgia, or I'm going to fly to wherever and go talk to those senators and congresspeople that say, you can't have peanuts because it's going to hurt, my farmers. I think there's got to be priorities on both sides of the equation. On the change in preferences, I think you're in a perilous place with AGOA and the timetable, as Ambassador Gurma pointed out, that if you try to wholeheartedly change how AGOA is structured right now, you end up opening a can of worms that you may never be able to put back in. It's, that Pandora's box, or that toy that I gave my nephew at Christmas where the snake pops out and he couldn't figure out how to put it back in. It wasn't so difficult, but he just didn't want to do it once it was out of the can. So I don't see a wholehearted change. I do think expansion of some product lines, bringing back in third country fabric would make a lot of sense, so we don't have to have that debate again. But I think when it comes to AGOA, I think there's some, keep some things how it is, but see how you can modernize it in the way it's administered from the U.S. side that does bring in those inclusive conversations, that puts the U.S. private sector, foreign private sectors, and foreign governments at the same table at the same time to have deep conversations about why can't I import poultry? I mean, why does it have to be that debate is driving the argument around AGOA? I mean, that should be a part and parcel of many things, and I agree that in that case, South Africa definitely needs to address the poultry issue, as everyone in Senate and Ambassador Froman have pointed out, but there has to be more inclusion in that conversation. It can't be a once every 10 or 15-year conversation.
Right. Ambassador, on the issue of the diaspora, I mean, what have you seen since you've been here and the inclusion of the diaspora in AGOA and in the U.S.-African trade?
Thank you very much. I personally haven't seen much in terms of what's going on the ground, but it is a concept which is acceptable to us as ambassadors here, and we have always, wanted to cooperate and engage the African diaspora here. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it is extremely important idea, and an example that we have just been told of here, I think is quite encouraging, and I would encourage my colleagues in the diplomatic community and also in the diaspora community that we should take steps to come together so that we can support each other. Otherwise, we are in complete agreement that this is also one of the important routes to follow, diaspora involvement.
And did you want to comment about trade preferences, the question that was asked about any changes you would like to see, or should we just go forward as is?
Yes. First of all, the African Ambassadors Group is completely in favor of AGOA enhancement. That must be clear. However, we think that significant changes in the legislation that would take a lot of time to draft and formulate can be put under a separate bill, so that the issue of reauthorization is not held back, so that the two issues go together in a way. So we support enhancement, whether we are talking about capacity building, trade facilitation, all of them we do support, because this is one way of making sure that AGOA is evolved, is improved, and we are talking about the future. What kind of AGOA do we want? And we cannot have a view about the future without looking at some of the improvements that are necessary. We have, up to now, certain lessons that we have learned, and we want to incorporate them going forward to make sure that we have a better AGOA for the future.
And can you talk just for a second about the role of women in Lesotho and AGOA? Who benefits from AGOA in Lesotho?
Women. That is very easy answer that we have. Honestly, the majority of workers in the textile industries is women. I don't know the actual figure, but it's definitely above, I think above 70%. So it's extremely important, and also of course the multiplier effect of this. For one worker, we have, for one family, one worker, there are about 8 or so other members of the family that benefit from that. And it's mostly women who also have to take care of their families, of their children, and the school fees and so forth. It's extremely important issue of women and youth.
Great. Thank you for all those answers. Fred.
Yeah, thank you very much, Whitney. I'm Fred Oladende with the AGOA Civil Society Network. I want to, on behalf of our members, thank Senator Karen Bass for all of the energy. Senator from the state of California. For the great work that she has done in convening us. I also want to thank our leader, Congressman Rangel, for the wake-up call that we need a vehicle in terms of timely reauthorization of AGOA. We know from some of the work that we've done, talking to people at the executive branch and also in Congress, that there is support for AGOA. But to get a timely AGOA passed, we need a vehicle, we need a purpose, and we need a focus. And we're looking forward to you, Congressman Rangel, to lead us so that we can get this bill passed on time. I want to take a few moments just to share with you some of the work that we have done, members of the AGOA Civil Society Network. And I'm glad that Walker Williams made the announcement that we're going to work as a team to try to work both on this side of the Atlantic and also in Africa to make sure that we galvanize civil society support. It is important that we get a timely renewal of AGOA, and we hope that with all the supports that we've heard from Ambassador Froman, Fleur-Élysée, the President, that we will. And we also want to make sure that when AGOA is finally reauthorized, that the targeted capacity building that we've asked for in our recommendation, I hope everyone has a copy of our recommendation. If you don't, we have it on the table, that we need to work to ensure that through executive action or through congressional legislation, that some of this targeted capacity building is clearly put in line with what the ambassador from Lesotho has said, not to delay the reauthorization, but to ensure that all of these very important elements that will make AGOA, particularly on the supply side, to be more effective is in place. I remember the leader of the African Union delegation, when he was addressing civil society last week, informed us that, you know, it's about $300 million in exports, non-oil export on AGOA. Well, we know also that the United States is almost 4- or 5-fold in terms of U.S. export. It is important that civil society work with the AGOA national governments to strengthen small, medium enterprises, create jobs, and make sure that we expand African exports under AGOA to the United States, because that is really the purpose